Welcome to our Together on Mission podcast, brought to you by the Baptist Union of Victoria and hosted by our Director of Mission and Ministries, Reverend Daniel Bullock. Daniel will be joined by a guest from our Victorian Baptist family each week for a brief discussion that aims to encourage you in your personal walk of faith and give you some practical suggestions that you can implement through your week. Throughout this year, the podcast will be focusing on the theme of being and sharing the good news. For the next 2 episodes, Daniel will be joined by Reverend Nathan Steer, Senior Pastor at Camberwell Baptist Church. Over the past 12 years, Nathan has completed a Bachelor of Ministry, a Master's in Theological Studies, and has been ordained by the Baptist Union of Victoria. Nathan is married to Jess and is dad to 3 beautiful young girls. One of his favourite things to do is get outdoors and enjoy the beauty of God's creation. Nathan and Daniel will talk together about good news journeys with regard to restoration and relationships. And now let's hear from Daniel and Nathan.
Well, welcome back to our podcast. Today I have Nathan Steer, the Senior Pastor at Camberwell Baptist Church, as my guest. Nathan, thanks for coming along. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about yourself, your family, and how long you've been pastoring at Camberwell.
Yeah, great to be with you. So I grew up on a farm in the northern parts of Victoria, attending a Baptist church in the middle of a paddock until I moved to Melbourne at the end of Year 12 to study. A couple of years after moving to Melbourne, I started attending New Hope, which is where I met you, and also where I met my wife, Jess, who was volunteering in the office at the time, and we've been married for 19 years now. We have 3 daughters. We started in ministry at New Hope after a short-term mission trip to Thailand, and being to another church before moving to Camberwell, where I came as an interim to help it through a season of change and transition, where 6 months later I was appointed as a pastor. And yeah, as you say, it's been 14 years we've been there.
That's fantastic, Nathan. In our podcast today, mate, we're going to talk a little about restoration and relationships. Could you share a little about what restores you in the midst of the busyness of life and ministry?
Yeah, I think been thinking about this. I think family and friends for me is a big one. Nothing like a family holiday when you get away as a family and spend time together, going and watching the girls play sport on the weekend, or just hanging out with Jess or with friends on the weekends. Another is probably working with my hands. I love a good home renovation or a project to get me out in the garage with something to do, or basically anything you can do outdoors. So whether it's camping in the holidays, a bit of bushwalking. I love taking my camera, but I do often get in trouble for delaying everyone.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, a lot of good things happening there. I'll come back to you in just a little while with a few questions after my reflection. At the May Pastors event, Nourish, the theme for the day was restoration and resilience. As I introduced the topic for the day, I used a hiking illustration and talked about how hiking is good for the soul, how hiking brings restoration. My illustration related to a 3-day hike I did in the Grampians with some friends. One of the friends that came along had never done overnight hiking before, but she was super keen to give it a go. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, the hike didn't work out all that well for her. Firstly, she hired a fair bit of her hiking gear, which is fine, but I told her to make sure that she evaluates and tests her gear before she comes on the hike, such as put the tent up and walk around a little with the pack and maybe make sure that you wear your boots in. I also talked to her about getting a few walks in before the hike to get her fitness up. Unfortunately, she didn't heed my advice, and as we started walking, she had a lot of trouble with her pack because it didn't fit very well at all. Then she put her tent up and one of the poles was broken. In addition, her fitness levels were low and she struggled with the physicality of the hike. And then to make matters worse, on the second day, her second-hand boots that she had brought started to hurt her. Needless to say, this hiking trip was pretty miserable for my friend. As we were driving back from the Grampians, my friend said to me, "I will never, ever, ever go hiking again." Then she said to me, "Why? Why, Daniel? Why do you do that? Why do you voluntarily put yourself through such misery?" Then I said to her, while hiking is hard, there's no doubt about it, it is good for the soul. But mostly, in the busyness of life, we need to get away and restore our batteries, and hiking does that for me. Yes, there are a lot of ups and downs and it can be strenuous, but it seems to me that restoration and resilience are things that grow in tandem. As we build our resilience, we can appreciate more of our surrounds, gain a greater perspective, we get stronger physically, mentally, and spiritually. At the end of May and in early June, along with Nathan, I walked the Larapinta Trail in Northern Territory, which is a hiking track that starts in Alice Springs and winds through the West Macdonald Ranges for about 230 kilometres plus a few for side trips here and there, and takes most people anywhere between 12 to 20 days. Nathan and I did it in 14 days. On the Larapinta, I pondered these things and the truth of my illustration. The walk was hard, there was no doubt about it, but it was restorative. I experienced it myself, but I saw it in many others. We met Jerry struggling up a hill on the first day. He looked physically cooked. At night when we camped, Jerry was standoffish, he seemed grumpy, and he was unable to enter into a conversation without going on some kind of rant. Yet, as Jerry continued to walk, you could see him literally being restored day after day after day. Physically, this guy who we passed easily on day one looked tired and old. Yet, he finished a day ahead of us. His disposition changed throughout the walk. He was talkative, engaging, and friendly. He was restored through the hike. I saw similar things happening with others we encountered along the way. But there was one other aspect of walking the Larapinta that also brought restoration, and that was the relationships built along the way. People taking an interest in others, generously sharing provisions, and helping people manage the challenges of the walk. It seems restoration, resilience, along with relationship, work in tandem to restore the soul. In Mark chapter 6, we find Jesus and his disciples weary from life and ministry. Since the beginning of his ministry, Jesus was teaching, he was healing, he was challenging his opponents. His good friend John the Baptist had been beheaded, and the disciples had just returned from a mission trip. They were all exhausted, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And like Jerry, they needed some time alone. So they go away to a quiet place, alone, or at least as a small group. Verses 31 to 32 of chapter 6 describe the situation. Then, because so many people were coming and going, they did not even have time to eat, the Bible says. He, that is Jesus, said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. We need to recognize in ourselves that life and ministry is taxing. And every now and then, for our own benefit and for the benefit of those we serve, we must make the effort to take the time to recharge our batteries. It will make us better people, happier, better company, and more able to serve. Hiking may not be the activity that restores your batteries, but hopefully you do have an activity or a practice that you occasionally retreat to, something that restores your soul, builds resilience, and enhances your relationships. Nathan, I talked about the combination of retreating, resilience, and relationships combining to restore us. I was wondering if you could reflect on how you saw this play out on our hike in the Larapinta.
Yeah, I think my experience was that relationships helped to build resilience, and that led to a restoration in me. Day one, I have to admit, was really hard. A little like Jerry, it was much harder than I expected, than we expected. Most of the training I'd done was in the cool of the evening, so Larapinta was 10 degrees hotter, my pack was 6 kilograms heavier. We were walking double the distance I'd done in my training, so I have to admit I was struggling. And then when you powered ahead, and I was on my own there for the part of the day, I wondered about giving up, about turning back, about pressing my buzzer and getting heli lifted out. And day one was hard. It was hard, and day two was just as long and just as hot, and the pack was just as heavy. And so while it wasn't any easier, I have to admit it seemed so much better because we travelled together. We walked together the whole day. We were able to encourage each other, even if it was just by being present with each other. And so it was evident, again, with one of the ladies we met. She was telling us how the first night she spent crying in her tent. But then she teamed up with us, she walked with us, and it changed her experience completely. It gave her a deeper resilience. She was powering along the tracks and a greater enjoyment of her time. I think that's what it's like in life and in faith, in ministry, when you're journeying with others. You have the resilience to tackle some of those really difficult places, and which are some of the most beautiful in the end. There's something powerful, I think, about sharing the journey with others. It builds our resilience and our enjoyment, even through some of the most challenging seasons.
Yeah, the relationships were fantastic on the way, and I must admit, we spurred one another on. And we get that, in Hebrews chapter 11, you spur one another on towards love and good deeds, like we're told by the author of Hebrews. So it was similar to that. But the interesting thing that I found is that, the toughest parts of the walk were also the best parts of the walk. They were fantastic. And that's where the relationships kicked in, because that's where we needed the encouragement, and it was absolutely fantastic. Did you find that yourself or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships for me, that was part of the core of resilience.
Yeah, and so for folks listening, we're all on a journey. There's no doubt about that. We're all on a journey, and there's some tough parts of that journey, some challenging parts. To do it alone is just tough, and we may make it, we may not, but we'll make it a lot easier if we've got others alongside of us, encouraging us and spurring us on. So let's do the journey in relationship with others as we do so. Thanks so much, Nathan, for your input there. My prayer for our listeners today is that you will find rest for your souls, build your resilience to flourish in life, and develop relationships that enhance your experiences. Until next time, may God bless you.